Well, I need to begin with some explanation. Some of you know me, and we've been around the block a few times together, and so you already know about me and about this. But for those who don't, let me say just a few words so that we're all on the same page, and you'll understand a variety of things. I have a condition that's developed over the last 6, 7 years, 8 years, that goes by different names. The initials are RSD and CRPS, reflex sympathetic nerve dystrophy, things like that. It's a matter of pain is what it's about. It's an issue of chronic pain. That began in one foot and now is in both feet and has moved up my legs. I can walk, I can stand up, I have use of my legs. The problem is it's painful. And as the longer the day goes, the more painful that can get. And so that's the reason for the chair. And when I have my legs elevated, it feels better generally than when they're down, because the nerves simply don't know what they're doing anymore in my legs. Now, I wanted to tell you that for a couple of reasons. One is because this condition causes me not to be able to do all of the things that I would like to do. There's what I would like to do, and then there is what I can do. And what I would like to do is to be at every session with you, hearing every speaker and enjoying every conversation, and physically my body simply will not allow me to do that. And I wish it was otherwise. I very much wish it was otherwise. So you will see from time to time that I'm simply gone, and I have to, in order to rest. The other reason I tell you this is because flip a coin, who knows what will happen. The issue of chronic pain is kind of a level thing that I treat. It goes up, it goes down. But from time to time, there are sudden bursts of intense pain. And when that happens, well, I don't talk. I can't talk. And usually those, if they happen, will be very short in duration. You'll notice me stop and pause for a few seconds, get things back under control, and we'll keep going. If, however, it does not calm down within a few seconds, who is my song leader? Woody is my song leader. So Woody is going to be ready with a song so that you can sing while I try to get things to calm down. So we'll see if that happens, see if it doesn't. But anyway, we needed to talk about that. I hate to do it, but we needed to. I was concerned when Kurt Nickham was not going to be here with me this year. Some of you know who Kurt Nickham is, and you know my relationship with Kurt, and he is always the guy that goes with me everywhere so that I can make fun of him. And I was concerned about, well, what am I going to do? Because Kurt does not, precede me, and it's James Thompson that precedes me, and I didn't think there was anything in the world I could make fun of about James until he said he was going to talk about prepositions. And so I started thinking, well, if you're going to talk about prepositions, then you're going to have a sermon series title. And so I started coming up with sermon series titles. You write these down. The greatest prepositions in the New Testament, that's going to bring them in. Prepositions in the Christian life. And I thought, no, that's not going to be it. Prepositions in the church. I thought, no, that's it. Paul, prepositions, and y'all. I like that last one. Oh, boy. boy, we'll see what he comes back at me with. Okay. The title of what I want to work on with you this afternoon really is the struggle to move beyond lament. I don't want to talk about lament anymore. I'm tired of talking about lament. I want to move beyond talking about lament. But personally, in some ways, and theologically, it's difficult to escape it. And I want to explain why that's the case and how we can move beyond lament. Now, I have 2 or 3 items, and one of the other effects of the drugs is that I can't remember notes anymore, so I have to kind of stay with my notes here. But one of the first things I wanted to talk about was one of the biggest concerns when we even say the word lament. Now you tell me, what's the biggest concern that people are going to say in your congregation if you start talking about lament? Well, there's a nice sigh. Okay. What else? Too negative. What else? Complaint. It's just going to be about complaint. What else? Did you say the word lament? You've not said the word lament yet. Okay. You know, I'm going to be stuck in a downward spiral if you start talking about that. Or, you know, we're already self-centered enough in our complaining. You know, do we really need to be more self-centered and complain anymore? And I don't want to be negative. Can't we just skip over this? And there's some truth in the objections, I think. And there's a great deal of misunderstanding in the objections. So the second item I want to talk about has to do with the single greatest thing for moving beyond lament, and that is a foundation. And I may be a bit more theoretical in this session than what I hope to be in coming sessions, but we got to talk about a foundation to build on that will move us beyond lament. And I want to talk about 3 steps. The first step is setting the forms. Setting the forms. Now, the misunderstanding that comes behind this one is that lament is just this unrestrained, lashing out, uncontrolled speech toward God. And that's not what lament is. Corrected lament has to do with setting forms. And I want to play with that word just a little bit, with the idea of forms. I grew up in a family of carpenters, construction workers. And so with the very first thing I think about when I hear the word form or forms is about setting forms for a foundation. You know, you dig out the trenches, you set the boards so that you're going to be able to pour the concrete into the form. So I think about lament in the sense of setting the foundation for the future, for being able to move beyond lament. Brueggemann, who's written everything he's ever thought, as you are well aware, and it's very good, uses the word formful to talk about this. And so lament is about setting forms for a foundation. In a second way, lament is a genre, which also has its literary restraints, and therefore is setting some forms so that the language is not just an outburst, uncontrolled, but rather it is controlled with literary barriers so that we can speak without fear because we have certain restraints put on our language. And those restraints are the elements of a lament. Now you have those, if you have the notes, you have those written there. I want to talk about them very briefly. You have the address to God. And that gets you going in the right direction because at least you're addressing the right person instead of the wrong person. You have the complaint that usually goes in three different directions. You talk about the complaint about what's happening to you. You talk about the complaint about what's happening or what those people are doing to you. And then the third direction is what God is doing to you, or what God could be doing or is not doing. And immediately we begin to get the question, well, I'm afraid I'm going to go too far if I start talking about that. Okay, if you're afraid you're going to go too far, just go to Psalm 88 or Psalm 89 or Psalm 38 or Psalm, okay, you get the idea. If you'll read those Psalms, I think it will take away the fear that we are going to go too far, because I don't think we can go any further than the accusations made in Psalm 89. That God has broken covenant and God is unfaithful. So we don't have to worry about that. We have these elements, these forms to work within. Number 3 are the requests, and they go in the same directions as the complaints go. And again, well, can't you go too far? I suppose you can, and you could. Jeremiah's rebuked at times. I mean, yes, you could go too far, but on the other hand, read a psalm like Psalm 58 or 137, and I don't think you have to worry about going too far. And then you have the motivation clauses where you're trying to get God to do what you want God to do. And finally, and very oddly, and we won't be able to talk about this sudden shift to confidence and praise. So these literary elements act just like the forms where you set for a foundation to hold the language within certain parameters so that you're able to pour concrete into the forms. And that list of, the elements for the form of lament, that's also the recipe for the concrete that you pour into it. Okay, I know I'm thinking kind of weird, but that's the way it comes out these days. Okay, and then we start talking about pouring the concrete. And this this picks up on another misunderstanding about lament, and that is that it's just a catharsis, cleansing, getting all this yucky stuff out of me and splattering it everywhere. Well, no, that's not what lament is, because first and foremost, lament is speaking to another person, God. And so it's not just catharsis, it's speaking words to another person. And if it's speaking words, that means it's speaking a language to another person. And if we're speaking a language to another person, it's not just language, it's relationship. And it's this relationship that is going to form the foundation. Now, yes, sometimes we need a place to vent. We come home from work and we've had a bad day and we need to talk about that, and we do. But it's controlled. It's controlled. Now, what's really important about this, I think, is that lament, in thinking about it in this way, trying somehow to get beyond lament, is setting the forms for the difficult conversations that a relationship needs if it's going to survive and thrive after a crisis is over. Now, I think you're following with me, but let me use an old, worn-out example that I wish I could find a better one. Who do you argue with the most?
Spouse.
Wife, spouse. Self. Let's talk after this is over. Okay, why? What?
Closest and most involved.
Yeah, they're the closest people to you. They're the most involved. Somebody else on this side said? Nothing?
They have to be submissive to their husbands.
Pardon?
They have to be submissive to their husbands.
James, got one for you.
Their ability to comfort.
Because that relationship matters to me. And so I'm going to have the hard conversations with my wife. I don't like them. But I know if we are going to have a relationship that is truly meaningful and is going to be able to get beyond lament and crisis, then we're going to have those hard conversations. And for the people that are out there that want to argue with me about something else, I don't care, and I don't have the time, and I don't have the energy. It's the people that matter. And so it is this speech that, if you will, becomes the concrete for the foundation. Now let's go to the step number 3 or whatever it may be and talk about letting the concrete set. Now, again, when we start talking about lament and we start talking about trying to get beyond lament, one of the first burning questions that's going to come up is, when can I or when should I be done with this and move on? Right? How can I know when it's time to move on? How can we know? Because we're eager for ourselves not to get stuck in this longer than we should be, and we're eager for other people. A couple of weeks ago at Pemberton, I had somebody come up to me and ask, if I buy your book and give it to my friend, will they stop lamenting? That was my answer too. Let's go to some text, believe it or not. Let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Ooh, this is dangerous territory for me to talk about 2 Corinthians with James here. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Let me make a few observations that have to do with this question of how long we lament. And how do we know when it's time to get beyond this? Okay, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 10. You are very familiar with this. This is Paul has a thorn in the flesh text. Starting in verse 7, middle of verse 7. Therefore, to keep me from being too elated, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan, to torment me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I appealed to the Lord about this, that it would leave me. But He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For whenever I am weak, then I am strong. Now, there is a lot that I do not understand about this text. You could start a list if you want. I don't know. I don't understand the messenger of Satan thing. I have no idea what the thorn is. I don't think anybody else does either. I don't understand what it means when he says, my grace is sufficient for you. I don't understand what he means when he says, my power is made perfect in weakness. I don't understand any of verse 10. What I do know is that Paul prayed. And he says he prayed 3 times. Now, if my New Testament colleagues on my side of the hall are right, they tell me that doesn't mean just 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, you're out. But rather, that has the idea of completeness, fullness, thoroughness. I prayed through this. It wasn't just 1 time, twice, or 3 times. There wasn't a rush here. Until finally, at some point, God said, that's enough. Okay, let's go to another text. Deuteronomy chapter 3. Deuteronomy chapter 3. Now, this is the Moses, and he wants to go into the promised land, and he's not allowed to because of what he did back in Numbers chapter 20. And the problem, if you look in Numbers chapter 20, was a matter of trust, not just hitting the rock, it's trust. And here he is begging the Lord one more time to go across. Let's start in verse 23. At that time, too, I entreated the Lord, saying, O Lord God, you have only begun to show your servant your greatness and your might. What God in heaven or on earth can perform deeds and mighty acts like yours? Let me cross over to see the good land beyond the Jordan, that good hill country and the Lebanon. But the Lord was angry with me on your account and would not heed me. The Lord said to me, enough from you, never speak to me of this matter again. Now I find this kind of fascinating, not just because Moses is praying, but do you notice who he blames for this? All of a sudden it's because of the people. And the Lord says to Moses, I finally had enough of this from you. I don't want to hear any more. Move on. Okay, Mark chapter 14. Mark chapter 14. And we're going to start, well, we're not going to read the whole thing. Make sure I don't overgo my time. In Mark chapter 14, beginning in verse 32, Jesus is with the disciples in Gethsemane. And he is going to do some lamenting. And he takes with him Peter, James, John. We're in verse 33. He's distressed and agitated. He said to them, I'm deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake. And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want. Now, you know how this is going to work out, right? 3 times. I think this time it is 3 times. It happens, and then look down in verse 41. He came a 3rd time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." That's enough. Enough of that prayer. Now, what makes that even more wrenching, and I'll let you look at this one on your own, is Hebrews chapter 5, verses 7 through 10, where it describes the prayer life of Jesus in terms that I was not expecting. Well, let's go ahead and look at it. You're going there, I want to go there too. So in Hebrews chapter 5, let's look at verses 7 through 10, because I've always imagined the prayer life of Jesus when he goes off to be by himself, to be kind of these nice times with the Father. And whoever's writing Hebrews knows something different. Chapter 5, verse 7, in the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to the one who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverent submission. In other words, what was going on in Gethsemane was not the only time that Jesus was doing that. That was common to the prayer life of Jesus. But then finally there came a point where it was enough. Time to move on. Okay, some observations. Observation number 1, in all of these cases, I don't see anybody in a hurry. Our society, our culture, including our churches, are in an incredible hurry. And it's kind of a crazy deal where American culture has so infiltrated the culture of the church that if we forgive, please, the illustration, if we bury our spouse on Friday and we're back at the work on Monday, then we're a person of great faith. Something's really wrong there. Something's really wrong. I don't see people being in a hurry with these texts. Paul is appealing over and over again until God says, enough. Moses is appealing a lot until God says, enough. Jesus appears to pray about this a lot until finally he says, enough, here comes the betrayer. Okay, observation number 2. Well, then how can I know? How can I know when it is time for me to move on from that prayer? And I have an absolute answer to that. I don't have a clue. I mean, I don't know, really. Now, I do know that what we might do that might help us if we really don't know if it's time to move on from a certain prayer. Bring a group of people together who are people of wisdom and discernment. That may be your elders, it may not be your elders. It may be some other folks too, probably. And let them talk to you and ask you the questions that you ought to be asking. They're not going to give you the answer. If so, they're doing a bad job. but they should help raise the questions that would lead to an answer. And then, I really think we don't need to worry about this. That if God has had enough of our prayers about something, one way or another, God is going to get us to stop and move on. I kind of believe in God. And that God can do that and will do that. But don't rush it. Don't rush it. Okay. Item number 3. And we might want to come back to that one. I hope we don't. Anyway, number 3. So what is the first step beyond lament? If we've set these forms, we poured the concrete of lament into it, we've not rushed the process of the concrete getting hard enough so that we can build on it, then where do we go? All right, there is an assumption that is made in almost every book that you can pull from a shelf that's for sale on the book of Psalms that talk about Psalms in categories such as Psalms of praise, Psalms of thanksgiving, Psalms of lament, okay? Any book that you pull off the shelf, with one exception that I've found, is going to take the following order. And I just do this from my own book. Chapter 9, like a snail dissolves into slime. So, okay. Chapter 10, will you hide yourself forever? Chapter 11, where is your steadfast love of old? Chapter 12, you have turned my mourning into dancing. That was right after ACU made its change in its policy, so I could put that in the book. You'll get it. It's kind of working its way outward. The chapters go from lament to thanksgiving. In fact, I had a text in my book that I thought was really good that talked about that. Starting on page 177, at the very bottom of the page about Thanksgiving Psalms, I wrote, as we've seen, lament springs from the claims of praise. Taken seriously, the declaration that the Lord reigns leads to confusion and protest when life is not experienced as a well-ordered result of divine sovereignty. In the same way, Thanksgiving Psalms are born from the practice of lament and reflect the crisis that evoked lament. In these songs, the poets stress the Lord's role in bringing life out of the pit of death. The same faith that informs praise and evokes lament requires an expression of gratitude when God intervenes. In other words, you go from lament to thanksgiving. And it's so beautiful and so wrong. Yes, sometimes the laments will lead toward some form of thanksgiving. We could look at examples, we don't have time. But I don't think that's the primary direction. I used to think that. When I was working on the second book, on about getting away from lament, moving out away from lament, I thought I had everything ready to write. I just couldn't figure out the structure of the book. And so at the fall meeting of the Nimrods of the Cave of Adullam, it was the Abilene chapter. That's the Old Testament professors at ACU that get together twice a semester to talk about our work. And if you look at things on our books, that says member of the NCAA Abilene chapter. That's it. Okay, I thought I was ready to write, and I couldn't figure this out, and so one of my friends in that group said, well, go back to the Laments and see where they point you. To go back to the Laments again. Where do the Laments lead you? And then follow them. So that's what I did. Now I want to make more observations. These are called points. But follow me, please. If we don't go directly to Thanksgiving, then where do we go? Let's go to Psalm chapter 4, and we're going to go through a lot of text in a very fast order. Psalm beginning in chapter 4. Finally, there we are. Chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. And all of these texts that I'm going to read are laments. All right. Chapter 4, verse 4. When you are disturbed, do not sin. Ponder it on your beds and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. Chapter 5, verses 11 and 12. Let all who take refuge in you rejoice. Let them ever sing for joy. Spread your protection over them so that those who love your name may exult in you. For you bless the righteous, O Lord. You cover them with favor as with a shield. Chapter 7 and verse 1. O Lord, my God, in you I take refuge. Save me from all my pursuers and deliver me. Chapter 9, verses 9 and 10. The Lord is a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. And those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. Chapter 13 and verse 5. But I trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. Chapter 22 and verse 4. In you our ancestors trusted. They trusted and you delivered them. Chapter 25, verse 1. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, in you I trust. Do not let me be put to shame. The same chapter, verses 20 and 21. O guard my life and deliver me. Do not let me be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you. Chapter 28 and verse 7. The Lord is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts. So I am helped and my heart exults. And with my song I give thanks to him. 31 verse 6. You hate those who pay regard to worthless idols, but I trust in the Lord. Verse 14. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. Verse 24. Be strong and let your heart take courage, all you who wait for the Lord. Let's do a few more. Chapter 38 and verse 15. But it is for you, O Lord, that I wait. It is you, O Lord, my God, who will answer. Now, we could keep going for quite a ways because we're only about halfway through the laments. And it is true that of the laments, some of them move towards thanksgiving. 19 of them, maybe 32%. But it is also true of the laments that 51 of those 60 laments in various ways emphasize the concept of, did you hear it? Trust. The destination, the where after lament, where do we go first, is trust. Now, I've already floated this past one, words don't come. And it was rejected because the claim was made, or the response was, well, that's self-evident and unnecessary. I'll let you decide whether that is the case or not. But I fear that if we don't point out the obvious, that this kind of thinking that from lament we're always going to move to thanksgiving or praise is going to lead to a dangerous fantasy island theology, where every wish or prayer offered in faith is going to lead to thanksgiving because God answers yes. Instead, what we see in the laments is that what they are doing is preparing the reader to trust. So that whatever answer God may give, whether it's yes, thanksgiving comes easily, but if it's no, and I don't get what I hope for, and I am disappointed with God, well, at least I have been prepared to trust the Lord so that I can fight from the high ground instead of trying to fight uphill. So point number 3, when lament's over and we're disappointed with God because we begged and begged for something that we didn't get, that demands trust. And what the laments are doing is getting us there before it's too late. Now, I hope you can hear in this another crucial reason for lament, because of what it's doing when we're not even paying attention. That it's moving us to a place and a position so that when God says no, if God says no, we are ready for that. And so if you're not already praying lament, I hope you are. Because otherwise, we're going to build on foundations that give way because they've not been built on foundations that are strong and secure.